Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and I am so excited to talk to today's guest because I'm a huge fan, and we'll probably talk about Vault Comics' Engineward a little bit, which I absolutely loved. So my guest today, they've also were the artist and co-creator of Morning Glories. They've done a bunch of comics. They have a new book that they're involved with coming out March 11th through Mad Cave Studios, Maverick imprint. It's called Student Government. It sounds great. I think it's also involving Lilah, Sturges, and Dave Justus. We're going to hear all about it. But please welcome to the podcast, Joe Eisma. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm so excited. You know, I do this because I just like talking to people about comics, and when I, you know, can have somebody on whose work that I'm a fan of and can really express that. Like,
Aw.
I loved Engineward.
I'm so
I
glad.
collected it. I got all 12 issues. I just thought it was a very I loved the story of it, but I mean, your artwork was just great. Like some of those, the character designs. And for listeners, if you don't know about Engineward, it was a Vault Comics series. It was 12 issues. Each issue kind of focused on a different character that represented somebody in the zodiac. Let's say it's about these folks on this planet. They kind of have these. There's representatives of the zodiac who are kind of like rulers, kind of like gods, and the one main character is called like an Engineward. She's kind of like an engineer. People start going missing in the town. They go on this great adventure. I won't spoil anything else, but as this complex story kind of unravels over these 12 issues, I mean, I just thought it was woven together beautifully. I thought it was something that totally stuck the landing and paid off on the promise of the series. And I mean, a large part of that was like your artwork. There was just so many like very interesting things about it. Some of the designs, I think. Also, I don't know. I don't think it was the cover. I think it was like one of maybe the opening pages, but it probably was with like Pisces. But there was like maybe it was the cover where the like you kind of had the watery outline and you could see through it. There were just so many like so many interesting things that were done. Totally fell in love with the series, and yeah, I just thought it was phenomenal. So that's my commercial for Engineward. Everybody, if you haven't read it, you can go get it. They also collected all 12 issues in like a really nice edition. I think you can still find, but yeah. So
Well, thank you. I mean, like that was such a labor of love, Engineward, and I mean, I have to give major props to George Mann, the writer who crafted this just amazing story, and Adrian Lossell at Vault, who just kind of let me run wild, let me just go crazy. Like there were things I was like, "Is it okay if I try this?" He's like, "Yeah, go ahead." And it was a true collaboration because I got to do things I'd never really done before because, in comics, there's kind of a thing about you do get a little bit typecast. And I was kind of the teen horror drama guy, from Morning Glories through the Archie stuff. And
okay.
Engineward was a genre, a kind of a field that I haven't really got to crack yet. And I was so happy to get to do that and to be able to just let my creativity flow and have a real say in the design of everything from the world to the characters to the covers. It was just great. And George and I worked really closely a lot on like a lot of the layouts. Like a lot of the layouts in there were things I wouldn't have normally done on my own had I not, collaborated with George and Adrian on this. I know there was one sequence where like the characters were like on this caravan to like go through the wilderness, and it was like the double page spread was like a sun, like the hours of the day, and that kind of started with George, and I kind of helped kind of guide it. but yeah, like that was so much fun. Like that book was my love letter to my nerd stuff, which is like the games of Square Enix, like Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger. So much of the designs in that book were kind of influenced by that. And it was just a great opportunity too to work with Michael Garland, who did the colors. He just did such a brilliant job on the colors. Michael was someone that I had been after for a long time to work on Morning Glories, but we didn't get a chance to make that happen. And so when Engineward came up, and I literally sought him out. I was like, "Can you please do this? I would love to have you." And he did, and he colored every single issue. I was so glad, and it looks beautiful. It's still, one of my all-time favorite series that I've worked on, just because everything about that book I felt like hit.
Oh, yeah. No, as a fan of it, I agree. And it's one of those things that I love where it's, a weird mix of because you're talking kind of like interplanetary stuff where you
Mhm.
always have a sense of like science fiction and the future, but you are also dealing with like limited resources. So, there's a weird mix of elements where you can
Mhm.
you can see almost a homesteady kind of like Western element to it, science fiction. There's like a quest involved, very, fantasy heavy. So,
Yeah.
and it all blended very well.
Well, thank you.
So yeah, I think if anyone ever, asks for comic recommendations, that is still always at the top of my list if folks haven't read it, because I head over heels for that series. So
Well, I can't thank you enough. You were always like, especially when we launched. I mean, you've always been such a great cheerleader for that book, and we were always so grateful to have you, like, you know, touting the book, and it was just so nice. Like the one thing that was so bad about the book was that we launched, 2020, in the
right,
midst of the
yeah,
pandemic, and it sucks because like when we were planning the launch, because I had started the work on this book in like 2019, and we have these plans. We were going to launch at San Diego Comic-Con 2020. We were going to have a big event, and of course none of that happened. So the fact that it even came out at all is, I feel like, a miracle unto itself. Like any comic that I ever work on, I feel is a miracle if it comes out. But like that one, especially given the circumstances. But that's the one thing I wish was different, because like, there's so much about that I feel like, COVID just kind of knocked the wind out of everybody, but that one especially is like, I feel like it just didn't get its time in the sun, and I wish more
yeah.
people would, check it out, and I feel it flew under the radar quite a bit, but
Yeah, no, I got that sense too, which is one of the reasons I would kept, trying at least in my little corner of social media to
mm,
shout about it, because
yeah,
I just didn't feel like if for I just didn't feel like enough folks were talking about it, and especially for the things that I like, it just hit, so many of those elements, because it's like a really kind of complex, like rich story. It can look, if you don't want to, if you're that type of person that just likes surface level stuff,
yeah.
your artwork's gorgeous. You're
Oh,
right.
well,
Michael
thanks.
Garland's
Yeah,
colors work so well with your art, and you could just go and like, oh, it's a fun adventure. But I mean, it also has so many layers. There's, you know, political, socioeconomic elements to it that you can like dig in. All of you together have created like a rich tapestry of this story. So
yeah.
I feel like it was one of my, favorite comics,
Well, I
that
appreciate
I
it.
in the past, decade,
Yeah,
that
that's
I've
great.
read. Yeah,
Yeah,
and just a really great, you know, 12 issue story,
yeah.
start to finish.
That's what I like. I like, because like this is the thing that I talk about with my wife a lot, like in the kind of media that we consume, whether it's TV shows or animation, is I love a good serialized story that goes on for many seasons or whatever. But I also have an appreciation for a story that knows, it start and finish, that has a resolution. That said, George and I are always open to doing more, because like there is so much, there was so much world building that went into this book. And while some of the characters, like their storylines may have wrapped up, there's the world, and there's so many other kind of avenues we could go. It's one of those things. I occasionally check in with George, and we're like, we want to work together again, and that's always on my wish list is Engineward 2. So I mean, if even if it's not Engineward 2, and at least another opportunity to work with George would be great.
Yeah, we have the two of you together. I fully endorse that. um,
Awesome.
but so let's turn a little bit because
Mhm.
I mentioned earlier March 11th, student government. I'm a
Yes.
big fan. Anyone who listens to the podcast knows that I'm a big Mad Cave and
Mhm.
Maverick fan. I've the past year or so I've had a number of creators on, especially recently with Mad Cave's 10th anniversary year.
Mhm.
I feel like they have they're just done some fantastic stuff in terms of the books they're putting out, also in terms of, you know, um, uh, some of the other like I hate when I call things IP. I don't like to do that, but I can't think of a better word right now. But Flash Gordon and like Dick Tracy and like kind of they're reviving those things as well, along with the creator owned stuff that they're doing. And I think some of the Maverick books they're putting out the past few years, have been, absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
So super excited for student government. This sounds like a great series. I just kind of read like the little blurb
Mhm.
about it that it sounds like there's like four students that are essentially trying to save their school.
Yep.
I think they're exploiting like a loophole in the charter or something to save
Yep.
their school from demolition. But why don't you
Pretty
tell
much.
our listeners, a little bit more about what they can expect with student government?
Sure. So you basically got the summary right there. It's these four students. They're kind of like the losers or whatever. They're the interim student government, so they're there between the fall and spring semesters. They don't go home for the holidays, so they're there with the interim student government, and their school is basically it's like a New England private school. Like it's in Rhode Island, so imagine like the Harvard and the Brown and all those kinds of universities. Very old school university, but they find this loophole in their charter, which I don't want to spoil, but
Okay.
they found a way to kind of save their school from demolition. And it very much it's a humor book. It's very lighthearted and not dark at all, like in any way, like compared to the stuff I've done before. um, but like the best way I can kind of like give an allegory to this is sort of like if you remember like 80s comedy movies, those teen comedy movies, like we got to save the school kind of thing, or better off dead kind of vibe, something like that. Like that, it's very much in that wheelhouse.
Okay. God,
Yeah.
I love Better Off Dead.
Oh, I know. So, I mean, this is written by Lilah Sturges and Dave Justus, who are some of my oldest friends, and we've actually known each other. Like I said, they're some of my oldest friends. We met at a free comic book day here in Dallas, where I'm from, in 2009, and we just hung out. We hit it off, and just through the years, we tried making things work. A couple pitches. I did an issue for a series that they did set up at another publisher that ended up folding. So we tried another pitch, and that didn't work. And then student government, uh, we worked on, and it's funny because they came to me, and my other book that I'm most known for is Morning Glories, which is set in a private school. They're like, we have this pitch. We don't know if you want to read it because it takes place in a school. And I was like, let me read it because I know them so well, and I like working with the two of them, and it was so charming, it was so funny, and I was like, yes, let's do this, and we sent it around, and Mad Cave and Maverick were just like so ecstatic about it when they got it, and they helped us kind of shape it because originally, like Dave and Lila's humor, it can be pretty crass at times.
Okay.
So Mike Martz at Mad Cave and Lauren Hitsuzen, who's our editor, they kind of helped us shape it. Lauren was like, "This is a YA book. Like, why don't you take this instead of like a mature reader's book? Let's make it a young adult graphic novel." And that was like the key, and that like totally solidified it. That made everything kind of come together, and um I don't know, this is like there's certain projects you work on, or at least as a creator, like for me, like Morning Glories or Engine Ward, and now this one where like the creative team, everything kind of comes together, and it has this like electric feel to it. And this was one of them. And I was just I'm so ecstatic for this. I'm so happy. This is like the longest graphic novel I've ever worked on. Um, it's 188 pages,
Okay. Wow.
which is shocking because our editor, she told us, is like, when they started writing, they're like, okay, our hard stop is 180 pages. So if y'all can do less than that, and they ended up going like 8 pages over, which I thought was hilarious. But yeah, I mean, it's I mean, I hate to say it's not totally a comedy. It's very much I mean, there's still like some drama aspects to it, and there's a lot of character stuff, and Dave and Lilah wrote some really just well fleshed out characters. It's got a lot of heart to it. It's very heartwarming story in some regards, but the humor is one thing that really attracted me to it because that's something that I love to draw. Like I love the sci-fi stuff like Engineward will always be like I want to do more in that vein.
Yeah.
And of course, like Morning Glories, like the horror aspect, I love that. But humor is something that I just really love to do. And there's not a whole lot of comics that incorporate humor.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's hard
it
in a
is. It is
comic, right?
extremely difficult. That's what I've learned. I've learned that it is so difficult to pull off humor in a comic, which is why you don't see it as much. I've been lucky to work with a few writers that I feel like have nailed it. Like I worked with John Layman. We did Charlie's Angels at Dynamite, and his scripts I felt were genuinely funny, and they weren't like, you know, kind of hacky, kind of funny stuff, but like he just wrote like actual genuine humor. And Dave and Lilah wrote some really genuinely funny jokes because they say that there's two genres that are really hard to pull off, which are humor and horror, because like just because of the reactions you want to elicit in the reader, viewer, whatever.
Yeah.
And those are kind of both of like my favorite genres. So but yeah, like it's a really great book. I'm super excited about it, and it's not like anything I've done before, really.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think horror is hard in terms of a comic
Yeah.
because so much of horror depends on, pacing,
Mm-hmm.
um, and building tension, and which there are not tricks, but there are things you can do in a comic if done well, but you can try and use the page turn sometimes, but it's difficult when like things are all laid out on the page. Your eye might catch something, and
Yeah.
you
You
I
give
mean,
it
some
away.
people yeah, or
Yeah.
some people might say, like, a jump scare is kind of like a cheap thrill in terms of horror, but you kinda lose some of that, so unless you're going for something really gory, horror can be tough, but, similarly, humor is tough, you 'cause so much of humor is dependent upon timing, whether or not you're watching a sitcom or a stand-up comedian, there's also elements of tone in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how a joke might be said, which you kind of lose all of that.
Oh yeah.
Um, so I mean, is that the challenge? Is
Oh
there's
yeah.
something else in terms of when you get something and you're like, oh, this is a really great like written joke. What do you have to do to figure out how you're going to like lay out the panel so that a punchline lands? Like what is that approach like?
That's a great question, and that's the challenge. That's like the biggest part of the work there. So one thing that kind of informs the way I draw, not just humor, but just in general, is I really love like caricature art. And so caricature art is all about exaggeration. You know, you focus on a feature of someone and you exaggerate it, and you play it up for laughs. And so with comics, I kind of try to approach it in the same way, like especially with just comics in general, because comics is a two-dimensional medium. You're reading a 2D thing, it's representing a three-dimensional world. And so you've got to do what you can to make the panels, the characters, they kind of need to come to life. And so exaggeration is the key to that. And this is like because I teach part-time, I teach art part-time, as well. I always try to tell my students like gesture, exaggeration, like that will make your characters more lively, feel more natural. And so when I'm getting a humorous scene or whatever, like I'm always, I'm very cognizant of like the pacing and the timing. And so like how the characters are acting in each panel. I try to like view them as like actual actors. Like how would I direct them? Like how they would conduct themselves in each shot. And so,
Okay.
you know, they need to be this way for this many panels so that the payoff on the joke panel will actually work or whatever. And so a lot of that is through like expression and body language. And that's what I bring to it. Like the writers, they bring through the words, the joke itself, and then of course the setup. Um, and like my contribution to kind of bring that over the top is to try and like use exaggeration and gesture and expressions on their face to really nail that joke. And so like that's what I work on with every humorous scene or whatever. And that stuff is challenging, but it's fun for me.
Yeah. You mentioned Better Off Dead. Like, is that what are some of the like cornerstones of your sense of humor? Like, what
Oh my God.
informs it, either whether or not it's TV or film or a comic or art?
Yeah.
What is kind of
So
what
I
has
love
helped
Better
you the most develop your sense of humor?
Yeah, so the director of Better Off Dead was a guy named Savage Steve Holland, and he did. I mean, I like Better Off Dead, but my favorite movie of his is one called One Crazy Summer.
Yeah.
I watched that movie so
Yeah.
many times. It's so absurd. Like my favorite kind of humor is like the absurd kind of humor, and so
Okay.
like it's just ridiculous, and like that whole movie is so ridiculous, over the top. If you haven't watched it, like I encourage anyone to watch it. It's so funny. John Cusack and Demi Moore, they're just great in it. That one, I love the Pink Panther films. Peter Sellers is Inspector Clouseau. I study all the scenes that he's in for like the way he, the way he plays a scene. He's like a living cartoon compared to everyone else in the scene who's trying to play it straight, but he's so cartoonish and over the top. So like that's kind of that influences me. I love shows like C Lab 2021. That's I'm dating myself. But it's
Okay.
like, Adult Swim, the
Yeah.
early
Yeah, Adult
2000s,
Swim stuff.
Aqua Teen, C Lab, Metalocalypse or whatever. I loved all of that stuff. And,
Okay.
yeah.
I kind of missed the I think because I'm in my mid 40s, so
Oh, so am I. Yeah.
like I kind of missed a lot of the Adult Swim stuff. But for whatever reason, I happened to catch a handful of episodes of Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and out of all the things that come into your brain and out, there's like one particular line of Aqua Teen Hunger Force, I think, where they give the neighbor like a bunch of laxatives, and I don't know why, but and Meatwad says like, "That man gonna poop himself inside out," and
Oh,
I
God.
was just like,
It's like so spot on.
it's just- I just think of it like all the time. The amount of
Wow.
times that this one episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force I've seen,
That's
and
great.
yeah, like my brother's Bobby. I shout out Bobby every episode. He's the Cryptic Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. Bobby listens to all my episodes. I say that every podcast, but
That's
Bobby's
great.
lactose intolerant, and every time he has like something with milk or cheese and he doesn't have his lactate, I always just instantly go, "That man gonna poop himself inside out."
Oh my God.
But it just-
Wow. That's great, man.
In any event, sorry for that digression.
No, it's perfect. I mean, it's great. Yeah. So, just like ridiculous, absurd humor is what
Right.
really resonates with me. And, I mean, I grew up in the 80s, and I was a teenager in the 90s. So, I loved Beavis and Butthead and the early South Park too. So, like,
Yeah.
those kinds of things were big influences on me. And like, not necessarily because I mean, like Beavis and Butthead is not very well drawn, and which I'm sure they would all admit to, but like just the everything about that show, like the aesthetic that they created, like it works for that kind of humor. And also the fact that that one and King of the Hill, like they're both kind of like I mean, same creator, Mike Judge, but they're both kind of set in Dallas, basically, where I'm from. Like I can literally, like the town that King of the Hill is set in is literally like 10 miles down the road from where I
Oh,
live.
okay.
And it's like so surreal to like like, I know it's a cartoon, but like I know it's like, oh, I can totally see where he got some of the ideas for these locations. It's because it's like it
Yeah.
looks just like this area, But
Yeah. Mike Judge is pretty pretty important with Beavis and Beavis and
yeah,
Butthead King of the
yeah.
Hill, but he also like Idiocracy and
In Office
Office
Space,
Space. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Like
Yeah.
I finally got my wife to watch that movie a couple of months ago, and she just loved it. And it's like like that's one of the all times for me is Office Space, because like that movie's, first of all, like it's so underrated anyway, but like and it's another one that flew under a lot of people's radar. I'm like, how have
Yeah.
you not seen Office Space? It's so great. It's a classic.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. That was one of those, very quotable movies to like,
Yeah,
us couple of us, my friends who were like movie nerds who thought,
yeah.
we were cool because we could quote Clerks in Office
Oh
Space.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, and so, when when you look at getting involved in like a project like this, like how good are you in terms of like, budgeting your time, because you're looking at, oh, I'm drawing like, 180, well, eventually I guess 188 page book. Like, yeah, what does that look like in terms of the timing of it? Like, because I think sometimes I get questions and listeners, how long does it really take to make a comic book? So when you
Oh
kind of
yeah.
are you involved in the process like early on,
Mhm.
like in terms of while they're still scripting and like sending you stuff, or are you handed a script and you're like, all right, well, we'll wait to give you notes. What is
Yeah.
it like?
Yes, all the above.
Okay.
Because like every project I've worked on is different. So like a lot of the work for hire stuff, I'm kind of brought into that. And it depends on the project. I may be able to do like character designs, and or if it's like Star Trek, like it's already established, I just have to like be able to get likenesses. But student government in particular was unlike any project I've ever worked on, because of the fact that Dave and Lilah were both pretty local to me. So like I said, I'm in the Dallas area, and in Texas, and Dave and Lilah, well, Lilah lives in Portland now, but they were both at the time in Austin, which is about a 3.5 hour drive south of me. And Dave's mom lives near me anyway. So like they came up uh one weekend, and they spent the weekend with me. And I've never done this. I had my iPad, they had their laptops, they were writing, we were like kind of throwing ideas back and forth, and we created characters. I drew
Oh,
them on the
wow.
spot. I've never done this because a lot of times it's all through email, like
Yeah.
I'll connect with the writer and be like, okay, here's like my basic pitch. I'll send in some character sketches. We'll go through them, a little bit back and forth. It's all electronic. This is the first time I've actually got to kind of create something from the ground up with the writers in the same room. And it was that's
That's
why I feel
awesome.
like this book has like an energy to it that none of my other books have, because like
Right.
I was a lot more hands-on involved. And there's a couple of characters that they had kind of quote unquote sketched out, in their heads, like, that they had written out, and I fleshed them out. I was like, well, what if they do this? Because I'm half Filipino, and I was like, why don't we make them Filipino? And like that hadn't occurred to them, and so like I drew these characters, and like, okay, now we understand who these characters are just based on like your drawing, and so that kind of helped them write the characters, and like that was like such a joy. But yeah, like every project's different, but like, I would love to be able to do more of these where I could connect with the writer in person for a few days. That we could just like, I could draw, they could write, we could just kind of throw ideas back and forth. But I mean, it's not feasible because we're all over the world. Like Engineward, George is in the UK. I'm over here.
Right.
I can't. Neither one of us can be like flying back and forth, but yeah, I mean, but it's very rare that there's a project that the collaboration isn't, ideal, or it doesn't work. But there's some that just click more than others. And, this one and Engine Ward and Morning Glories are all ones that just kind of really came together.
Nice. Yeah, that it is interesting, to hear when, if the a writer or whoever it is on a project has an idea for a character, and then like you
Mhm.
kind of with comics, you kind of the artist kind of starts to really sketch it out, and how either the personality or that, the character's arc kind of like clicks, into place when you actually see it. When that image you might have in your mind kind of
Yeah.
starts to get, fleshed out,
Yeah.
along with those other details and like, and the character arc. I mean, that is just kind of, that's one of like the great things about,
Yeah.
comics when
Yeah.
that starts to happen.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, that's why I stay in this business, because like it's kind of thankless. I mean, and it's very solitary. I'm just in my office all day by myself for the most part. And, it can get a little, I mean, it can get kind of isolating feeling. I mean, I used to do, back in the days when people used Skype. I don't know if you want to remember Skype. Um, I used to get on
Yeah.
Skype calls with other artists, and we would just chat and draw at the same time. I mean, it'd be lots of dead air and stuff, but I mean, we just have it on in the background and we just be drawing, and that was nice. But because I'm not part of a studio or anything. I'm just myself. Um, but this is what I love to do. And I used to like my workload, like um because I was just doing more Inglorious for a while, and like I really it's difficult for an artist to branch out and do multiple projects. Writers, it's easier because they don't it, and I'm not down talking writers or whatever, but
You're
it's difficult.
single-handedly starting the writers versus
I
artist
know,
discourse.
but the mathematics is it's a lot less time consuming to write a page than to draw a page. So
yeah, you're right.
yeah, so like a lot of the writers I worked with were working on multiple books, and I'm like, I just have this one, so I wanted to do multiple ones.
Sure.
So like I started taking on lots of books, and like it actually did negatively affect my health for a while, because like I would be getting up at like, because I have two sons. They're older now. They're 12 and 16, but years ago they were a lot younger, and I had to do a lot of the care for them. And so I would be getting up at like 4:35 to work a little bit before getting them ready for school or whatever, and then working a little bit, and then picking them up from school, hanging out with them, making them food, dinner, and then spending time with them, putting them to bed, and then working late into the night. So that was just,
Right.
I was burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
And so when I got married to my wife a few years ago, she's like, you need to just, reevaluate, because you're so stressed out. And so now I keep pretty standard office hours, like, in the office at like 8:39 and out at 5, Monday through Friday. I mean, occasionally I'll have to off to work like a day of the weekend, but
Right.
I try, but like keeping those boundaries, like keeping those standard, like everybody else's 9 to 5 hours, whatever, has done such a, an amazing job on like not only my physical but my mental health. And I feel like my work has improved, just because I've gotten to be a little bit more regimented about my schedule. So like, and it took a lot of time and work to get to that point, and not everybody can do that. And so I know how lucky I am to be able to like be in a position where, because like my kids are older now, so like they're in school more, and I don't have to like they're not doing as many extracurriculars. I don't have to go to soccer practice and t-ball and all that stuff. So it's much easier now where I'm at, now, to like focus on my work and really put a lot more TLC into my pages.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the phrase like work-life balance is kind of like,
Yeah.
kind of buzzwords, but it is like hugely important. And like as
Yeah.
you said, like it can affect not just your like your mental health, but your physical health.
Hmm.
So that it's definitely important to do that and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
I'm curious, with you, because I reading up and preparing for the interview that you were kind of on a different track in terms of like it was something still creative, but I think it was more like TV and film.
Yeah.
And then did you what graduate from Baylor and then went
Yeah.
back to a different school for art creation?
Yeah.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, so when I went to college, it was one of those, like, I had no idea what I was gonna do. So I went to film school, and I worked in TV production and hated it. But I remembered, because I always drew, but like I kind of stopped when I got to high school, because like so This is terrible. Like when I got to high school, I discovered like first of all, I was like, it takes too long to draw. Like I was like, I fully realized that because it started taking me like an entire day to draw a page, basically. And my 16-year-old self, I was like, no, that's lame. I don't want to do that. So I picked up the guitar, and the girls liked the guitar more than the comic page. So I was like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
that
draw
tracks.
the guitar more. I know, right? So I kind of stopped drawing for like a decade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I studied film, I played in a band, and I did all that. But then, post college, I was like just not happy with what I was doing. And I was like, I've always drawn like, and there was a new program that was doing art for game design. And I love video games. So I went to this grad program for that, and I worked in game development independently for 10 years for a local developer here in Dallas. We just did like, it's like an indie developer. So it's basically like, a smaller developer for iPhone and Nintendo DS, if everybody remembers the Nintendo DS.
Oh, yeah.
But I did that for a while, but like that also ended up developing to a point where I was like, I'm not really satisfied with this because I was literally just getting a list of things to make, having no creative contribution. So that's when I started kind of drawing comics on the side, and eventually the comics kind of took over. So I left game. I haven't done games in like well over like 10 12 years, something like that. But yeah, it's like I've had this really weird career path, from starting out in film and then going to games and then now into comics.
Right. And teaching now too, right?
Yeah, and I teach like part-time occasionally just because it's fun. It gets me out of the house, which my family loves because eventually I started to turn into like, a hermit or whatever. And they're like, you need to go spend some time outside a little bit.
Right.
So, yeah.
What kind of stuff do you do? I hear, other creative people, whether or not it's a writer or an artist, like get to a point, not necessarily like writer's block or art block, but
Mhm.
sometimes, it's referred to as like the well. The well might like run dry and you need to like replenish it. Like, are there things that you do, whether or not it's like read somebody else's comics or play a video game
Oh
or
yeah.
go to a museum, or what are those types of things for you now, you know, as someone like me in your 40s with two kids and
Yeah.
trying to manage all this stuff? Do you still have time to do those things? And like, if you do, what are they?
All of the above. Yeah, nah, I love video games. I like COVID really reignited my love of playing video games because like as soon as I feel like it was almost as soon as lockdown happened, Final Fantasy VII Remake came out, and like so I kind of associate like my escape from the stress of the pandemic with playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then that just kind of I went back and I played, God of War 2018, and I just went and played Horizon Zero Dawn and did all these other like, great single player, action adventure games. And so like rediscovering game because like when I was working in games, like I wasn't doing anything on that level. I mean, we're talking like really low old school style stuff. But it was almost like I'd seen how the sausage was made, and it kind of took the luster of video games away from me because I was like, I started to look at games and be like, all right, so I understand where this is, and I understand like this is just a 3D model and like that kind and whatever. And I mean, obviously we know it's 3D models, but like it just kind of I started to look at it not as a fan, but like as just someone who'd worked in it and was like not able to enjoy it. So like
Right. Okay.
I had enough time away from it now that I can enjoy it again. So I play games and I get like re-inspired, and I play like the Final Fantasy games, any RPG, I play, and it's great. It just kind of reignites my creativity, and yeah, that and watching shows. I love anime and animation. Blue Eye Samurai came out a year ago or something. Oh my god, one of the most gorgeous animated series I've seen recently, and another one that flew under the radar. Like I tell people, like, "Have you seen Blue Eye Samurai?" Like, what is that? And I'm like, "It's so good. It's on Netflix. You gotta watch it." Um, and
Yeah, I didn't hear. I don't know that one. I'll have to check it out.
yeah, and it's really it's a I mean it's not it's not a one and done story. They're gonna do a season two, but I mean it's like eight
Okay.
episodes, and they make every second, every frame count, and it's beautifully
Uh-huh.
animated, great art style.
Oh,
So that
nice.
stuff, that stuff just like reignites me. So yeah, gaming and just like looking for like animation and I don't get to go out to movies as much as I would like to, and of course there's not as many great movies out anymore. But it used to be I would go see films with, like, my favorite directors, and that would really inspire me. But yeah, it's really just down to games and shows now.
Nice. Are
Yeah.
those things that your kids enjoy with you, or are they like that's dad stuff? And
No, there's some of them that we can watch together,
oh, good.
and then there's some games that we both like together. Like both of my kids, just each on their own finished Ghost of Tsushima on PlayStation 5 recently, and like I want to play it, but like and so like you know, we kind of do this like, well, we'll recommend each other games, and like my youngest is playing Horizon Zero Dawn now, and
Okay.
he's liking that. But they still also have like their own tastes. Like my oldest, like I feel he's 16. I feel like I don't know how many times he's played it, replayed it, but he literally I feel like lives in the Red Dead universe. Like he plays Red Dead Redemption all the time. And I'm
Oh,
like,
that's
I'll sit there
funny.
and I'll watch him play. I'm like, don't you get bored of this? And he's like, no. So, I mean, kudos to the developers, for creating a game that keeps him that, and I don't have to spend as much money buying him games. I mean, he's happy with that one. But
Yeah. Well, it
yeah.
works.
But yeah, so like, we have a little bit of back and forth where there's games like we'll try or shows that we'll recommend to each other and we'll sit and watch together, and that's great. I love that. But like in terms
Yeah.
of like the comics, like they used and this is what's funny, is they used to think it was pretty cool, but now it's just like that's dad stuff. Like that's like, it's not they're not as impressed anymore. Like I used to be able to show them comics, like, look at this, and they're like, oh, that's so great. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like
That's
nobody humbles you like your kids, I will say
oh,
that.
100%. Like that is absolutely true. No, that's yeah. No, I mean that is true. And so I mean, I guess uh, are there things that you're, I guess, working on next that you can't really like say yet? Do you have your next thing,
Yeah, I have a
lined up?
couple. It's so funny.
Nice.
Like, as a freelancer, the thing I always worry about and I stress about is like, is this gonna be the last thing I work on? Like I don't have anything lined up. I stress about it all the time.
Yeah.
Um, Invariably, uh, I end up working something out and I find something, and like I don't do as many conventions as I used to, but I always try to do like New York Comic Con because that's the
Okay.
one where I connect with the most editors and writers and stuff, and that plots out my next year or 2 years. So yeah, I've got like 3 projects coming up. And like that's the most I've had in the works in a long time. I'm sorry, 4. Sorry, not to brag. But like,
Go ahead. You can. Look. You're the guest. You can brag.
oh,
It's
okay,
okay.
okay. Well, yeah, so, like, I mean, I have Student Government coming out in March in my next book, which is also with Mad Cave, but so Student Government is through Maverick, which is their young adult imprint,
Yeah.
but my next book will be with with Mad Cave, with the Mad Cave proper, and completely again, totally different. That's what I love about these projects that I do is, like, every one of them are completely different. So Student Government is, it's young adult, it's a little bit more broad appeal, and it's got humor, it's got good heart. The next book I'm doing, which I don't know when they're going to announce, is literally a mashup of horror and romance. And it's very violent, very gory, um, but it's got some really like kind of what I feel is like classic old school comics romance stuff in it too. So um, I'm super excited about it because again, like that's my thing for taking on a new project. Is like, have I done something like this before? And if the
Right.
answer is no, then that automatically shoots the me wanting to do the project like up like immensely because I don't want to keep doing the same thing. And that's what's so exciting about every project that I have coming up is that they're all different. And, because nobody wants to be typecast.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, Joe. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the on the podcast today, and listeners, March 11th, student government. I love what Man Cave and Maverick are doing. And listeners, if you haven't, find Engineward, check it out, and
Please do.
and even Morning Glories. If you're not familiar with Joe's earlier work, but Morning Glories is great as well. I think that was Image, right?
Yeah, it was Image. Yeah, Image Comics. We got 10 trades out for that. So
Yeah. So I'll put links to stuff in the show notes. But Joe, I just I'm a huge fan of your work. I can't wait for Student Government. I can't wait to see what else you have coming out. And I'm just very appreciative of you, chatting with me on the podcast. This has been very nice. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so happy to have been here. Thank you so much for bringing me on, Jimmy. It's been great.
All right, listeners, find me on Blue Sky or Twitter, or our Comic Book Yeti, the Cryptic Creator Corner website. Let me know what it is you're reading, especially if you check out Engineward. Let's talk about it. I never tire of talking about it, especially Joe's artwork. It's absolutely amazing. And pick up, Student Government. I say they say the Maverick books are like YA, but like I have enjoyed every one of them. So I don't let that, don't let that turn you away from what I'm sure will be a very good story and will have fantastic art in it.
We have some jokes in Student Government that I was really surprised they let us get away with for a YA book too. So,
yeah,
it's not all squeaky clean.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. And if you need a movie to watch, go check out One Crazy Summer, Better Off Dead. If you have not seen either of them yet, they are very much a product of their time, but very, very, very well worth it, I think.
Oh, yes. 100%.
All right. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you to Joe for coming on the podcast, and I will see you next time.